Well, thank you to the Chamber, thank you to the Cloverleaf, and to all of you for being here this morning. It's great to do this stuff in person again. I'm Drew Hansen. I currently represent the 23rd Legislative District, so North and Central Kitsap County in the House. Most of what I work on is related to helping people get decent jobs and support their families. So I'm responsible for a new electrical engineering degree at Olympic College in partnership with WSU. I do cybersecurity, early childhood education degrees with Western in partnership with Olympic. And also a statewide bill to make college and apprenticeships more affordable. We put a little surcharge on the revenues of accountants, lawyers, software engineering firms. We use that money to give scholarships to families at or below the state's median income. And I mention apprenticeships because, there's a lot of ways to support your family that don't run through a four-year college degree. 2 weeks ago, I was meeting with people who work with HVAC refrigeration technicians and electricians. Man, we're going to have a lot of demand for HVAC and electricians all throughout this state as we move towards decarbonization. And so we got to start thinking, well, how do we get more young people interested in the skilled trades? How do we tell people it's all right if you don't learn by reading and writing and listening to lectures? It's great if you learn with your hands. There are ways to make $33 an hour as an HVAC apprentice. How do we get the word out about that? So that's what I've always worked on, and if people are kind enough to elect me, what I will continue to work on. I love working across party lines. We have Democrats and Republicans up here right now. We have Democrats and Republicans in Olympia. Some of my biggest legislative accomplishments, in fact about all of them, have been bipartisan. So for example, 2 years ago we passed the Public Broadband Act, which broke the cable company's stranglehold that prevented Kitsap PUD and all the other PUDs from running broadband directly to the public. Boy, that was a bloody fight. I mean, we had to break people to get that through. But with the help of a broad bipartisan coalition, we were able to bring that through. And as a result, Jefferson County PUD is now looking at running broadband directly to the residents. I heard yesterday that Mason PUD wants to do the same, and the cable companies are threatening to sue them. That's not real democratic country in Mason County, but let me tell you, I am excited to work with them to beat back that effort so we can work together to figure out a way how to get internet access to the public in a cheaper, more affordable way. That's the kind of bipartisan cooperation to help keep costs down, help people support their families that I care about, that I love to do.
Thank you, Drew. And in the same race, Paige.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you to the Greater Kitsap. Joe, thank you for moderating. It's always a pleasure to be here when you're moderating. And thank you to everybody who's here. I really appreciate the support of the community that you are coming out and really taking time to care about this election. We haven't had that in the past. A lot of people are just voting. They vote party ID. In this election, I've seen people really come out and start talking to the candidates and talking about the issues and wanting to understand how legislation works and how they're being represented. So my name is Paige Jarquin, and I'm running for the 23rd Legislative District, position 2, against Drew Hansen here. And I just want to say thank you to him as well. He has been, he has reached out, and we've come to an agreement that, that this race is not personal, that we're just both professionals looking to do what's best for Kitsap, and we like to keep it on a friendly level. So thank you, Drew. I appreciate that we're able to do that. A little bit about me. I spent 30 years in the professional world in real estate, building, and almost that equal amount of time in community service. So boots on the ground community service, working with women, mentoring them, and working with at-risk youth, mentoring them as well, working with an organization on their board of directors called Chicks in Crisis that help women at every level, regardless of what their choices are. And then the other reason, the why do I run? I'm running for 8 little reasons. 3 of them are here in the audience. 6 of them live here in our community. And I'm running because I'm concerned about their future. I want to see, I think that our children are the future of Washington. They need the education, they need the environment, and they need the tools to succeed. And I'm concerned that we have less economic opportunities. I'm concerned that we have less safety and less security, financially and physically. So that's the reason that I'm running, to provide those things. I fear that if our future isn't better and brighter, then they're not going to have the opportunities that I've experienced, the success that I've experienced in life. So, and I believe that as a community and as legislators, we can do better. I believe that we can have a less bloated government, and that we can use our resources wiser and more effectively at the front. My name is Paige, and I hope that come November you give me an opportunity to serve you in Olympia.
Thank you, Paige. Now our candidates from the 26th position 2. We'll start with Michelle Caldier.
Thank you, and thank you to the Bremerton Chamber as well as Cloverleaf for hosting this event. Thank you guys who are here today. So I am Michelle Caldier. I represent the 26th Legislative District, which goes from West Bremerton, Port Orchard, Key Peninsula, and Gig Harbor. I was born and raised here in Bremerton. Actually, my father's here, and he was born and raised at Harrison Hospital as well. And we have a long line of family that is from Bremerton, and I just hold Bremerton very near and dear to my heart, and also Kitsap County. So prior to serving in the legislature, I was a dentist, and I devoted my entire practice to caring for the nursing home folks and homebound individuals. In addition, I also taught at the University of Washington for almost a decade, and was also a foster parent. So once I came down to Olympia as a citizen, advocating on behalf of my nursing home residents, and I learned that one person could make a difference, and that inspired me to run for office. While I've been in the legislature, I've been in the minority the entire time, and I learned very quickly that I have to work with the majority party and members and my Democratic colleagues in order to get anything done. One of those examples is when CHI Franciscan in our region, they basically starved out independent practices and used their leverage to hurt individual providers and make it so that they could purchase those independent practices. Then they had a monopoly in 6 subspecialties all across our region. Once they got the monopoly, then they prevented many procedures from being done in less expensive ambulatory surgical centers, and it almost overnight it drove up the cost by double digits. So I worked with the other 20th district representative at the time was Sherry Appleton and also Senator Christine Rolfes. And partnered with Bob Ferguson, and we had
30 seconds.
The first antitrust lawsuit in Washington State against hospitals and against the monopolies and the mergers. And we were able to be successful with that, and it inspired other legislation to be passed to help prevent that from happening in the future and drive down healthcare costs. So I look forward to continuing to serve, and I also look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. And in that same race, her opponent, Matt Macklin.
Good morning. I always appreciate the morning versions of these because I'm not so good at night. So I didn't get my first round of coffee until I got here, but I should be good in about 5 minutes once everything's done. So I'm Matt Macklin. I'm running for the 26th position 2 House. Michelle is the current seat holder. I am a resident of Port Orchard. I've actually run 2 nursing centers right here in Bremerton, one of them through the pandemic until things settled, if you can call it that. I'm an attorney practicing in business law primarily and administrative law, and I also do some consulting working with not-for-profits and governance, transition not-for-profits that are struggling at times with transition and financing in some cases. But yeah, that's what I do. In the last 3 years or so has been primarily a focus in healthcare and working on the front lines as a nursing home administrator. It's really what inspired me to run this round. During the pandemic, seeing all that we went through and all of the fractured economy, the fractured healthcare systems. Michelle talked a little bit about kind of where some of these juggernauts of industries have come from and trying to hold them accountable through antitrust and such. All of those reasons are elements of why I decided to run. Seeing some of the bills passed in the legislature that are very good-hearted and spirited, some of them missed the mark, but not by any bad faith. I feel like we need to do a better job at having the right people around the table to get it right the first time. Particularly healthcare. It's good to see some of my colleagues in another kind of focus group that we're working in the county to bring independent, full healthcare opportunity to our county that doesn't rely on just one chain of events. As a healthcare expert, in operations especially, we can lead the ball with football season. So lead the wide receiver, not seeing where these large healthcare companies and organizations are coming from, but seeing where they're going and stopping them in their tracks, providing alternatives to our county so that we don't see the crisis that we see up at St. Michael's. Seeing what those folks are going through, my heart breaks for them. My wife is a nurse. She's an advanced practice nurse and practiced in the field in hospitals and nursing homes. I know what they go through. I managed nurses for years, and through no fault of their own, they're going through a struggle we've never seen before. A part of my plan that I love hearing Drew talk about what he's done with apprenticeships, we align very well with that, bringing those apprenticeship opportunities to the trades to help solve some of our biggest problems, whether it be crime and providing officers to the streets or builders to the fields and to the neighborhoods to build houses. All of these high demand trades that are going to be coming as we make a transition to greener energy. These are all things that not only I have ideas about, but I have bills ready to go. And I appreciate your support on the 8th or before we're mailing state.
Thank you, Matt. Next up are our candidates from the 35th, and we'll start with Travis.
Thank you. Thank you for the Greater Kitsap Chamber and the Cloverleaf for hosting this today. I'm Travis Cotoure. I'm a U.S. Navy veteran. I served on submarines right here in Kitsap County, USS Alabama and Nebraska. And a little bit about the 35th district. It encompasses 3 counties, rural Kitsap County, all of Mason, and a lot of Thurston now after redistricting. And it's interesting, the 35th is rural from top to bottom. We have one incorporated city, Shelton, fully inside the district. And one of the reasons I'm running is to give a better representation for our rural communities in Olympia, which I feel have been left behind. I work in Kitsap now for Lockheed Martin on the same subbase. I'm a program manager for the Fleet Ballistic Missile Program. We have a little over 300 employees and over $1 billion in strategic defense assets that I help to manage. And I'm really proud to do that job because I get to continue my service in a way with the U.S. Navy, sailors, and the Marine Corps every single day for an important mission of strategic deterrence for our nation. On top of that, I have 4 kids, a family of 6. I live in Allen in Mason County. So again, I work in Kitsap, live in Mason, and also campaign in Thurston. So if you look at the district, it's about the size of Rhode Island, so it's a lot of driving for me and Sandy, and we know it well, especially with the gas prices. One of the big reasons I did this because I believe our rural communities have some pretty simple shared values. We want to feel safe. We want to give our kids a great education. We want to provide for our families, especially in times of high inflation. And we want our constitutional rights and liberties protected. And so it's with that simple message that I launched this campaign over a year and a half ago. And we've been running pretty hard ever since. And it's those values that I feel are not being represented in Olympia today in the majority party. And it's one of the big reasons why I want to run to help represent our rural communities. With things like, we have the lowest per capita police in all of Washington State in the 35th District, and the lowest per capita police in all of the United States in Washington State. And so we can't be dead last in our rural communities for police on the ground. with my 4 kids are all in North Mason School District in public schools, and they suffered because of, just like many of our kids did, with the lack of time in school during the pandemic. The grades, the comprehension rates are falling, and we need to do better for our rural schools. And finally, with the economy the way that it is, we need new solutions to try to give people tax relief, as well as to try to have sustainable budgets. Thank you.
Thank you, Travis. And for our final candidate this morning, Sandy Kaiser. Sandy?
Good morning, thank you. Thank you to the Cloverleaf. It was a really good breakfast. I'm still working on it. And thank you to everyone who's come out this morning. It's really nice to meet you. I'm Sandy Kaiser. I am a 4th generation descendant of loggers and farmers in Western Washington. I believe in hard work, love of family, community, and country, and that everybody in our district deserves the same chance of success, whether they live in town or out in the country like I do in rural Thurston. I served our nation overseas under Democratic and Republican presidents as a senior foreign service officer. I traveled the world, worked alongside military and intelligence officers to defend our democracy, to sell American products, and to protect the rule of law in particular. I retired from that job with the equivalent rank of a 2-star general and came back to Thurston County, rural Thurston County, where I saw something had changed in those years I was away, and that was that the gap between our rural communities and our urban communities had grown deeper and wider. Whether you were looking at levels of economic success, levels of educational attainment, you could just go down the list and see how things were getting more and more difficult for folks, especially in the rural side. I spent a few years working at the Department of Natural Resources as a high-level official, got a really good look at what was happening in our forests and our waterways. And then I went to work at the Evergreen State College as a vice president, where we served military veterans coming back to get their degrees and non-traditional students. I am convinced that our best days lie ahead of us here in the 35th District. Travis did a really good job describing the immensity of it. We have some work to do in the legislature, and as a rural Democrat, I would be really focused on local jobs, especially protecting our sustainable forestry and our shellfish industry. I'm really proud to say that those industries are behind my candidacy. I've been supported by Sierra Pacific Industries as well as Taylor Shellfish, and we know that those are world-class industries that we're very dependent on in the 35th. So I really look forward to working on those local issues like improving public safety in our districts. We know that's a real problem. We need more resources there for police. We need to make sure they have the training and the resources to do their job. And I think we need to work on tax relief, especially for working families and limited income seniors who pay a disproportionate share of taxes. So we have an opportunity here to put a rural Democrat, reasonable, common sense Democrat in Olympia to bring our interests to the table and make sure, as part of the majority party, the 35th District gets its fair share of support as it works for the beautiful future. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy, and thank you to all our candidates. We're going to start with our first question. We'll start with Drew. We'll work our way down. The next question, we'll start with Paige and work our way down, so on and so forth. It's my favorite question that we've had so far in these series, so I'm going to start with it. Drew, with a magic wand, what one piece of legislation would you like to magically get signed by the governor during the next legislative session?
That's a great question. It would unsurprisingly be one of my bills. I started working right after the Supreme Court announced its draft opinion reversing Roe versus Wade on a big bill to make sure that when people from Idaho or Texas come to Washington State to get abortions, that our doctors and nurses and healthcare providers do not get hauled into court in Texas or Idaho, either civilly or criminally. And believe you me, that is a danger, because they have made very clear in these other states that is something they are looking to do. And so I think if you think as I do, that abortion is part of basic health care, you do want to protect doctors, nurses, other people who assist patients in accessing those services that they can no longer access in Texas, Idaho, or elsewhere. I've been working with doctors, the Hospital Association, UW, and people on the ground to try to get that, and I would love to get that bill done.
Thank you, Drew. Paige?
I like magic wands. One of the first issues I would address is the gas tax. We currently have a gas tax of 46 cents, and with the upcoming 2023 increase due to the Climate Commitment Act, we're going to pay another 43.7% gas tax per gallon. This isn't something that the average person in Kitsap and Washington can afford right now. And with a budget surplus of in excess of $15 billion, we should be able to offer everybody in Washington an opportunity to save a little bit of money at the pump.
Thank you, Paige. Michelle?
Okay, well, I'm assuming that he's already signed Paige's bill, okay? So if that's the case, then I probably the second most impactful thing would be to have a true fix to the Blake decision, which basically the Blake decision made it so that people can have very hardcore drugs, and we have very little consequence. So right now, law enforcement have to suggest treatment 3 times before there's any action to be done, which basically law enforcement has said that there's no tracking system, that there's no point in booking someone, that they're so overwhelmed. So I would have a true fix to the Blake decision, make sure that treatment facilities are available, and allowing people to choose between treatment or jail. And I think that would be a much better solution than what was passed.
Thank you, Michelle. Matt?
All right, so since we're going to piggyback a little bit, I'm going to help Michelle on her treatment facilities. My focus would be getting a magic wand to wave and provide a reapproach to our secondary education that addresses the skilled trade pipeline problem. So nurses, aides, builders, HVAC, all of those things, mental health professionals, and relieve some of those barriers in the licensure process that not only slow down the flow of licensed professionals and things like mental health in our state, but stop people from coming because we have a threshold that's really unnecessarily high. That's kind of the other half of my life as an administrative law and as a licensed professional myself, understanding how some of these reciprocity laws and things work, lowering that barrier so that we're on an equal playing field when it comes to recruitment from out of state and from within as well. So a combination of education reform, I guess is what we could call that, that actually provides the resources that some of these other bills are going to need to work.
Thank you, Matt. Travis?
Yeah, to keep it in the spirit of keeping it different, I think that our rural communities are soft targets for crime from other surrounding more populous areas. And I kind of touched on our lack of law enforcement on the ground in our rural communities, especially in my district. And what I would like to see is a redirect of some state funds to help with recruiting and retention, to help our local law enforcement in rural communities compete with some of those bigger law enforcement agencies in more populous counties, so that we can get more police on the roads. But we need more funds as far as more jail space as well. We need to modernize there, and we need to get more training centers for our police as well. So really it's a resources for law enforcement issue, and right now it's just too much of a backlog to get a police officer on the road once they've been hired. It takes too long. Thank you.
Thank you, Travis. And Sandy?
Okay, what's left? I'll tell you. Homelessness. Some kind of comprehensive approach to the issue of homelessness. It's a huge issue in the 35th district, in rural communities, and in our few urban areas as well. We need to take a step back and come up with something comprehensive that will address rapid rehousing, health care, mental health, additional resources for law enforcement who have to deal with so many issues related to this. It's an impediment to growth, economic growth in our region. It penalizes small business people in particular who have to deal with it. It's inhumane, the situation right now, And I think it's at the nexus of so many issues that we really need to focus on right now in our state. So I would really hope to see some kind of thoughtful, comprehensive legislation to address homelessness in the state of Washington.
Thank you. Next question, we start with Paige. The next set of questions is going to revolve around transportation, because I think about 25% of these questions revolve around that. Paige, in fact, this is a good piggyback to your last answer. Do you support the Climate Commitment Act, Senate Bill 5126, passed in 2021 by Olympia, and its potential to increase the cost of fuel by almost 50 cents a gallon in the next 5 years? Please explain your response.
So, no and yes, because all answers are complicated. Life is not usually a series of yes and no answers. Do we need to care about the climate? Absolutely. Do we need to do things to fix it? Absolutely. But the Climate Commitment Act is putting the cart before the horse. They are asking for aggressive change, aggressive regulations that we don't have the infrastructure to support. Yeah, that's pretty much the answer.
Thank you, Paige. Michelle.
So this was a bill that was very, very partisan because I don't think that even though it says Climate Commitment Act, I don't think it's actually going to fix any problems or very few problems that we have with our environment. We have major issues with sewage being spilled into our beautiful Puget Sound. The majority party just puts blinders on and says, okay, let's not protect our waterways, let's start instead doing this whole cap and trade. And basically those policies will increase not only the cost of gas, but all of our energy. And then in turn, it also increases the cost for everything else. So our food needs to be refrigerated. Our food needs gas in order to, electricity or energy in order to even transport those things. And so we have to ask the public, are you willing to have those greater costs for that small benefit? I think the answer would be no.
Thank you, Michelle. Matt.
So yes and no. I support the idea. I think it's a very aggressive timeline, but I am at least happy to see that a line was drawn or a plan was made. It's an incomplete process, and I think that the common theme of not going to work, we're done, that's not a good approach. I think that we have to also put other mechanisms in place that are going to make this thing happen because it should happen. When we talk about investing in solar power, wind power, whatever other green energy, whether we talk about the increased desire and need for energy as it's coming, saying that it's not going to work and shutting the doors on it is not the solution for what we see as an imminent danger and problem, especially when we talk about protecting our environment, our staff. Whether we're talking about the Puget specifically, climate change is a true and real threat, an imminent threat to the sound, just like sewage. So we need to properly address both of those problems, and saying that there's nothing left to be done because one's not in the majority is also not a good approach. So finding ways to introduce legislation to address real problems, real solutions is key. I think everyone wants to protect the sound.
Thank you, Matt. Travis.
Yeah, we need to protect our natural environment, but not on the backs of our people. I am against the Climate Commitment Act, not because I don't want to protect the environment, but like Michelle said, we have a lot of sewage leaks and no one wants to do anything about it. That's contributing to pollution in our environment. But we don't even know and may not know for years, maybe even over a decade, what things like low carbon fuel standard will do or this Climate Commitment Act. If anything, for climate change, it's just a tax. And at a time when inflation is so high and the gas prices are so high, and they want to force us by 2035 into electric cars, newsflash, folks, we don't have the power grid, we don't have the infrastructure right now to do that. They're talking about getting rid of the Snake River Dam, which helps supply 90% of our hydropower in the state. We're going to turn the lights off on all of Washington. We have to be smarter. We have a crisis of balance in our legislature right now, and when you don't listen to the other side, you get bad bills like this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Travis. Sandy?
Climate change is real. We see it every day, and I'm sure we've all been breathing enough smoke to last us for a long time, or especially the last few weeks. In our area, sustainable forestry and the shellfish industry are truly important. and they are directly imperiled by climate change. We are seeing our forests are sick, which is not a good thing because that makes them more prone to wildfire. In our state, we've always worried about wildfire on the east side of the state, but we're going to have to start worrying about it on our own side of the state as well. Likewise, the shellfish industry, the oysters and the clams are having a hard time growing their shells hard enough for harvest because of ocean acidification, which is a direct result of high levels of carbon. So we must take action. I don't like the way the current legislation puts an undue burden on rural communities in terms of the gas tax. I would like to see that fixed.
Thank you, Sandy. Drew?
So I do support the Climate Commitment Act, and I voted for it. This is in the organ of the policy belongs. It's a cap and invest system where it puts a cap on greenhouse gas emissions that reduces over time, and you use the proceeds from the permit auctions to invest in helping communities navigate as we transform to a hotter and drier future. That can be everything from helping shellfish and aquaculture to forest management to what I was literally working on 2 weeks ago, which is again, how to get more HVAC, refrigeration, and electrician technicians into the trades. Those are the jobs that are going to be created as we move towards a decarbonized future, and the money for that comes directly from the Climate Commitment Act, which is one reason I supported it.
Thank you. Next question. Looks like we start with Michelle. So I'm going to kind of try and loop two together here. In the next 2-year budget cycle in Olympia, what would be your #1 transportation budget project to fund? You have 1 minute, but that would also include things about a larger regional airport, the ferry system, Gorst. Go.
Oh, wow. Okay. So first of all, a little bit of history. So over the years, the transportation budget has basically, the majority of it now funds fish culverts, many projects that have nothing to do with transportation. I believe that #1, if I could change things in the budget, it would be to pay for those things out of the operating budget. And making sure that the money that we generate from people who are using the roads actually go to pay for those things. That's #1. #2 is that we need to acknowledge that people are in vehicles and that we need roads to support them. So it would be to fix the congestion in Gorst, and that's going to be a very expensive endeavor, and making sure that that's taken care of. And then also making sure that we are fixing the major problems that we have within our ferry system. So, and making sure that there's accountability when we take out a bridge. I could go on, but...
I'm sure you can. I apologize. It's one of the downfalls of having so many people on the panel. The questions got to get put together. Matt, same question. Transportation. What would be your priorities?
Michelle and I agree on this. I'd like to see more of the transportation budget go towards transportation. I would like to see gas tax be really repealed and find that money elsewhere. And hopefully we can do that within the same budget. I think that the gas tax is unfair for our community. A car is a lifeline. But I would like to see less studying and strategy surrounding Gorst and the Sinclair and the ferry system, and more implementation of those strategies or a solution that gets the congestion away from the Gorst corridor and really rethinks our ferry system, not just to be greener, but to be going and coming from places where we need it most. And again, that is also going to be on the backs of those same kind of apprenticeships and filling the jobs pipeline, because I think our biggest challenge now, green or otherwise, is the ships don't sail. There's not enough bodies to man them. So that would be the transportation issue I would like to see resolved, is finding our staff folks to staff the ferries and actually implementing the so many plans that we've invested in over the years. Of course.
Thank you, Matt. Travis?
I'll just take on to that, and I'm glad you brought up the studies, because we just spend millions and millions of dollars on studies every year, and all we ever seem to do is just study things. I think people in my district and probably across Kitsap are just sick and tired of just studying things forever. We need to start putting shovels in dirt and actually getting the job done. I have to sit in that Gorst traffic every single day like most people, and it is atrocious. And I think it's probably harming our climate. if we just sit idle in our cars and dead stop traffic all day long. But of course, a lot of transportation money, like Michelle mentioned, are not going towards transportation things. They should be going in the operating budget instead, and we should focus our transportation money on meaningful solutions that provide great mobility, provide congestion relief, especially in a time where our climate is such a big topic. And so I think that we can do a whole lot better in that area. Thank you.
Thank you, Travis. Sandy?
Two sources of wisdom for me on this issue have been Senator Tim Sheldon, who's retiring in the 35th District, and the Squaxin Island Tribe. The Squaxin Island Tribe says, don't plan just for tomorrow. Let's plan for the 7 generations to come. Let's make good choices. Tim Sheldon says, transportation is so incredibly important to our district. We have to be investing in roads for our own survival and if we are to thrive. So with those two things in mind, yes, build roads, but think again ahead, 7 generations. Let's look at the ferry system. Let's invest in the ferry system. Let's electrify the ferry system and bring it all the way to the South Sound. Let's have ferries coming from Shelton, from Olympia, to get us off I-5 and take our state into the next generation of transportation.
Thank you, Sandy. Drew?
So far and away, my top transportation priority is the ferries. The ferry system is a disaster right now. It is the legacy of decades of underinvestment. In my first or second term in the legislature, I voted against a big gas tax increase because there wasn't enough money going to the ferries. We were going to spend about as much money on one highway in eastern Washington as we would on the entire ferry system. I said no. We are getting better. I actually just talked to our transportation chair 3 weeks ago about the need to invest both in more boats and maintenance so they don't go down, and critically in the workforce. We have a global shortage of mariners and marine engineers. We are competing with BC ferries. We are competing with the big shipping companies. We have to pay people more, and that's okay, right? We want to get people to work on our ferries. We need to pay people more, but we also need to be more flexible with working conditions. One of the problems we have is the so-called on-call system, where you show up to work there and you don't know what route we're going to be on. We got to fix that.
Thank you, Drew. Paige?
There's a significant disadvantage to going last. Everybody said everything. I guess what I would say about transportation in general is that it's a complicated thing. You don't plan a road for next year or the year after. You start planning roads 20 years in advance. That means we have to do studies. However, we can make better use of the studies that we already have, as Travis mentioned. I think another thing that Drew brought up, which is the workforce. We do have problems with our workforce, and it is a disaster, but one of the things that we could do immediately to get some of our workforce back on the boats is to stop the mandates for vaccinations. I realize that vaccinations are important, but they are keeping a significant portion of our workforce at home, out of a job, without money in their pocket.
Thank you, Paige. Looks like next question we start with Matt. We're going to transition now to speaking about housing. And the first question is, what do you see as the biggest change needed in the Growth Management Act to better support entry-level affordable housing?
The Growth Management Act is very complex, and I think it falls short in a lot of ways that addresses our problem today. The biggest challenge is the permitting process and the requirements that are disproportionate by community. So it doesn't capture the real identity and the real challenges of each community. For instance, Seattle is quite different than Port Orchard or than Tacoma even. By failing to update zoning, by failing to update the approach to the urban sprawl or the requirements to annexation, that's left to the county. I think those are the real pieces that are missed in the Growth Management Act, and why we see what the effects of that is today, when we see, Bremerton, for instance, in the sprawl, and we see the holes, kind of a Swiss cheese of municipal lines.
Thank you, Matt. Travis?
Yeah, the Growth Management Act is really a big top-down approach to land use and other things, and there's 13 points to it. And now they're talking about adding more points to it, but it really has a disproportionate effect on certain communities. For instance, it affects urban communities differently than rural communities. And in rural communities, things like the Growth Management Act have helped to decimate rural communities. And I would look for reductions in the Growth Management Act or ways to reduce its impact on rural communities. I don't think we should be adding to it right now. Environmentalism is already a point. We're talking about adding climate as another point. We can go too far. And first we need to take the doctor's approach and first do no harm. And we can't have all these top-down approaches that help I-5 corridor but hurt us. Thank you.
Thank you, Travis. Sandy?
We need to make it easier to build in town. We have a lot of vacant lots in some of our old timber communities. And we really need to look at opportunities for folks to come back in and homestead those communities. They have a lot of amenities, and we're actually even starting to see it happen now, that during the pandemic, quite a few folks from Pierce and Kitsap moved into the 35th district because it's a little more affordable. But we need to be able to work with municipalities to allow people to build in their backyards, whether it's an ADU or a duplex. We need to fill in more so that way we can preserve our agricultural land and our working forests and bring some density to our cities that will help people get to things like healthcare, schools, work. We have a lot of potential, but we need to make it easier for builders to build the kind of properties that people want to live in.
Thank you, Sandy. Drew?
So housing prices in Kitsap County at least are out of control. I mean, I don't know how, you can't have a community where the average house is $500,000 and up and have young families living here. It's not going to work, right? So the solution to that is we need to build more housing of all types in areas that are already zoned for density, whether that is duplexes, whether that is triplexes, multifamily units, or even in areas that aren't zoned for density, what we used to call mother-in-law apartments that we now call ADUs. Now, we could use a lot more of those countywide as a rental option and, if possible, as a homeowner option. And it's not just affordable housing, right? I mean, I'm not talking, I mean, we need that too. Okay? We need housing that's limited, you have a certain income. We need a lot of market rate housing, like housing that builds on the market in areas where we already have density, where you can walk to stores, walk to the ferries, walk to transportation. And we need that, we need as much of that as we can so we can get housing prices down.
Thank you, Drew. Paige?
I think when you partner the GMA with the Climate Commitment Act, it raises the regulations on building and it raises the costs. Just the HVAC, using a heat pump now, which is going to be mandatory in upcoming built housing, it raises the cost of a new home by $24,000. So that makes new houses unaffordable for the average person living in Kitsap based on our average income. And I think it's time, as other people have mentioned, that we look at opportunities, the ADUs, but also mixed use in areas that are already designated for density. We can look at mixed use options for downtown. But we have to remember, not everybody in Washington can walk everywhere year round. So we need to have housing that's available for everybody.
Thank you, Paige. Michelle?
So the Growth Management Act is a couple decades old, and there's some significant problems with that, and we've seen that over the years. Number one, you can look at the city boundaries of Bremerton and also of Port Orchard, and you can see how the cities have refused to annex certain low property areas into the city to allow building because it's so expensive to upgrade the streets, lighting, stormwater drains, everything. So we have a plan that is not working, and it needs to be fixed. And Republicans are united in getting it fixed. However, that has not passed over and over again because the majority party refuses to allow any changes to the Growth Management Act. In addition, we need to make sure that we are building to keep up with the number of people. That is why the housing crisis is what it is today. So until we can get our Democratic colleagues over to our side, we will continue to see housing prices increase.
Thank you, Michelle. Travis, I saw you raise your hand.
I didn't really want to challenge, I just wanted to go more.
Okay.
So,
You get one additional minute.
but it was covered, so we're good.
You're good? Okay. We will hold on to that. Next question, we're going to start with Travis. There is a homeless person sleeping near here. I passed him driving in. What legislation do you have ready to go if you're elected to office?
Yeah, the homeless situation is heartbreaking. When I look out there and I see people who are struggling, I think that's someone's mother, daughter, father, brother. Those people need help, but we also need to stop being soft, right? We can't allow homeless encampments, tent encampments where drugs and rampant drug abuse and violence and crimes happen. So there needs to be a balance. We have a lot of services, but not a lot of people going to those services. So we need to do a better job of connecting people to those services. And one thing I would like to see in the legislature is more accountability for the money that the state sends to help with this problem, and so that we can find who's doing the job the best and fund those entities and find those who are just profiting from human suffering and stop sending that money. Thank you.
Thank you, Travis. Sandy?
That was you might remember my magic wand answer was that we would be able to deal with the issue of homelessness in a kind of thoughtful, comprehensive way. Because we know it's incredibly complicated, right? I mean, some folks are there because of drug abuse and addiction. Other folks are there because they can't afford home housing or don't have work. So it really does take this kind of comprehensive approach in the legislature, something that looks at rapid rehousing, drug addiction, job training, et cetera, et cetera. But I also do believe in accountability as well. It's really important for people to put the work in, to want to change their situation. It's important for the providers of the service to be accountable, and ultimately it will be the legislature that I think should be held accountable if we deploy these kind of resources that we think are needed. It's really probably time for an approach like an emergency approach, almost like what we do with COVID. This is an emergent issue in our communities.
Thank you, Sandy. Drew?
My top priority would be building more supportive housing. That's something like Pendleton Place, which just opened here in Kitsap County. It's 72 units. Sorry, I should explain that. Supportive housing means it's not just a roof, right? You got like mental health treatment, substance abuse treatment, job training. All of that is right there with you. That's the answer. I mean, that's the answer for people who have serious chronic problems, staying under shelter, getting things together. We need a lot more of that. It's expensive, but interestingly, I checked this with friends of mine who do commercial real estate. They're like, that's about what it costs to build a multifamily building without the supportive housing. So we're figuring out a way to do it at a good price tag, and boy, oh boy, what we save long term in making sure that people can get into stable housing and stable jobs is well worth it. I would do that many times over.
Thank you, Drew. Paige?
I frequently hear the term leading with compassion, but I don't think we can measure in regards to the homelessness and the drug addiction and the mental health issues that go with that. But I don't think that we can measure compassion in intentions. I think we need to measure it in outcomes. And the outcome is we've doubled our budget for these issues, and the only thing that's doubled in regards to that is the amount of homelessness, the amount of drug issues, and the amount of mental health that are not being addressed. I think that we're a housing first focused community where we want to provide housing to get them off the street, but I think we need to look at a more holistic approach, and we could look to Austin, Texas for that. They have a community first housing community, 51 acres, where they do all of the things that Drew was just talking about with tiny homes, RV living, and all kinds of, they're able to address the mental health and learning to go on. So we need to be focused on a more holistic approach to this.
Thank you, Paige. Michelle?
I think the number one thing is to make sure that all of our homeless programs are sustainable for the individual. What I mean by that is that last year when we passed the budget, we put about $1 billion into homeless programs. And the Department of Commerce then had a bidding process. And what they did was that they only awarded the bids to mostly King County, some Pierce, but nowhere else in the state. And then what they did was they purchased not one, not two, not three, but 4 buildings in Capitol Hill where the average cost per unit is around $300,000 per studio apartment. And I will tell you that the average person that is currently chronically homeless cannot afford ever to live in Capitol Hill. You and I cannot afford to live there. And so we need to make sure that they're sustainable, just like the Community First program, which I actually visited in Austin, Texas.
Thank you, Michelle. Matt?
Yeah, very good responses. I think it's a complicated issue, and I tend to think more long-term. So we certainly have an immediate addressment that needs to happen, and there's also long-term, particularly mental health and addiction, and veterans are disproportionately affected by some of these things. We talk about the GMA. We talk about what do we have ready to go on day one. I have a plan that would bring public and private partnership together to get some things done, but it fixes the problem that Michelle's bill points out, the accountability issue. It is different because it holds accountable spending, holds accountable to outcomes, so that we can see, the measurable outcomes that we are shooting for in the bill. So the legislation is not vague. It's already funded partially, and then it also pulls funds from the state to match, so that we don't have the disproportionate effect in our county, in our districts on the peninsula, from the resultant mismanagement of what maybe Seattle's doing or Tacoma.
Thank you, Matt. Next question, looks like we start with Sandy. Sandy, we've got a multitude of questions here around healthcare. And here in the footprint of the Greater Kitsap Chamber of Commerce, healthcare has been a large topic in the news recently. So there's a couple of questions here. I'm going to kind of put them into one. Given the difficulties facing our only emergency room here in Kitsap, do you feel the Navy is contributing to the burden by not reopening their ER at naval hospitals and treating their own? Do you feel that federal impact aid money is in order in this regard? And the residents of the 26 currently have limited access to comprehensive, affordable, equitable health care. What are your plans to support health care to your constituents?
That is such an incredibly important issue, and those of us who have ever lacked health insurance know the terror of what that means. We have an issue not only here in Kitsap County, we have an issue throughout the state of Washington, throughout the United States. If we talk about outcomes and accountability, we put so much into our healthcare system. It's incredibly expensive, but having lived overseas, you can see that it is indeed possible to guarantee a basic standard of healthcare that's really going to meet most folks' needs for so much little money. So just as the issue of homelessness requires us taking a step back, instead of trying to fix with Band-Aids this and that, this also requires a step back with federal partners to really come up with something that is going to work for the majority of people. It's crazy to have this patchwork of federal, state, local resources that don't align with each other, that duplicate needlessly, and don't give us the outcomes we need.
Thank you, Sandy. Drew?
So the situation at St. Michael's is a disaster. Back when Old Harrison closed, I was part of a protest against its closing, saying that we needed more than one fully functioning, fully staffed hospital in Kitsap County. And we were right. Okay, we were right. Everyone who said, no, it's going to be fine, they were wrong. And so that's where we need to focus, is creating more options. Some of the tools we have at the state level relate to competition review. Usually, under antitrust law in normal life, you look not just when consolidation happens, you don't just look at whether prices go up, you look at whether output goes down, okay, whether the services go down. That's what we're seeing in Kitsap County, okay, output has gone down. And so whether that is with competition law or whether that is with creating new options, obviously there's a big debate in the county right now about a public hospital district akin to what Mason County has done. Look at all of them because you cannot have just one choice.
Thank you, Paige.
healthcare is, again, a complicated issue, as having just one hospital in a community doesn't work. The Naval Hospital, to the best of my understanding, isn't functional at this point, not simply because of staffing, but because of the age of the building and its ability to serve the community. We need more choices. We definitely need more choices, and it would be nice if St. Michael's could, get together what they need to be doing to become a certified hospital, and they haven't been able to get that done. So I would support more choices in our community.
Thank you, Paige. Michelle?
So this is something that I have heavily fought, and like I said before, that spurred the first ever antitrust lawsuit against hospitals. And I've also passed legislation to prevent the mergers and acquisitions. Unfortunately, once those are done, it's so hard to unwind those. We definitely need competition in healthcare, and right now we don't have it, because not only does CHI Franciscan control the hospital, but they also control all of those other doctor's offices as well. So it says the doctor's clinic, it's really CHI Franciscan, let's just be real. So we definitely need competition. The biggest issue is fixing our certificate of need process. The certificate of need process allows for CHI Franciscan to have a monopoly in our area, and that is something that I'm going to continue to work on to fix.
Thank you, Michelle. Matt?
Yeah, this is a great question. I'm glad they asked it. But yes, absolutely choice, but also using a scalpel to address the issue, not a hammer. We have an ER issue, we have an urgent care issue, we have a primary care monopoly issue. We have a group that I work with directly, not related to the campaign necessarily, to solve this problem right here at Kitsap. The public hospital district is likely a good route for us. There is a network of non-affiliated providers that we can bring together as a community to provide the services and the care that we need. Competition drives quality, drives pricing, drives outcomes. All of these things can be addressed without having to put a brick and mortar hospital up right now. That certainly would be great to have another hospital, but we need solutions today. And we have the people in the community that are able to do it. It's a matter of addressing some of the structural problems at the legislative level. You mentioned the certificate of need, which is certainly a burden, not just in hospital care. The tower that's not going to go up is 70 beds that are sitting banked now, and they're set to expire in 2024. We don't have that long.
Thank you, Matt. Travis?
Yeah, well, good discussion and good points. I'd like to just tab on the competition piece. I believe competition is the high tide that floats all boats. And what we've done in this state, in this country, over recent years is make healthcare scarce by making health insurance scarce. And what I mean by that is we have an exchange with only a few options, and when you look at those options, they're literally all the same with different names attached to them. And that's not real competition. And that flows into other issues as well, like just capital projects for more hospital beds and everything else. Our healthcare is expensive. It's not getting cheaper. For me and my family, it's incredibly expensive, and I could just think that it's the same for most people in my district. And we have to have more competition in our system and less red tape so that people can get the health care that they deserve. Thank you.
Thank you. That will conclude this portion of the Q&A session. We are already at the top of the hour. There are some great questions left over. I apologize I wasn't able to get to them. But we've come to the point where we're going to start our closing statements. We will start on this end, Sandy, and then with Drew. You have 2 minutes. Sandy?
Thank you so much, and thank you for the great conversation and the lovely questions today. They really hit to the heart of the challenges that we face here in our part of Washington State. One thing to remember as we take these things on is how incredibly blessed we are to live where we do live. And I'm not saying just this particular patch, but our state is such an amazing place to be and live. I'm so proud of the tradition, our tradition of logging, our traditions of farming. My family came here over the Oregon Trail, immigrated from Switzerland as well. And we were dairy farmers, we were hunters. And yet, we have evolved as a family and as we evolve as a community the same way. We are one of the best places in the United States to live. And we should remember that as we contemplate the challenges ahead. I take so much strength from that, and I take so much pride in it as well. As someone who served our country overseas, I could have lived anywhere in the world, and I chose to come right back here because I knew all that was true. One just last story to tell you on the campaign trail. I knocked on a lot of doors. It's been quite an adventure, getting to meet a lot of folks. And I knocked on a door the other day, and this guy opens the door, and he kind of has this spark in his eyes. He's about 40, got a great big beard, covered in tattoos. And I say, "Hi, I'm Sandy Kaiser. I'm running for a state representative." And he goes, "Oh, will you come in and have a shot of tequila with me?" And I kind of went, well, it was a Sunday afternoon. I looked, and his wife is there, and I said, "Okay, sure, I'll come in." And we went to his kitchen, and I had a shot of tequila. And he was an independent voter and veteran, and I made a friend that day. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy. Travis.
Thank you for everyone for attending. Again, I'm Travis Cotoure. I'd appreciate if you're in the district your vote this November. I believe this race is about what I like to call the Venn diagram government. There's things on the left and the right that maybe there's no agreement on in that Venn diagram, and maybe there never will be, but there's a lot of things in the center that we will have to work together on in this state, Democrats, Republicans, Independents, in order to fix. We have crisis level issues surrounding housing, mental health, homelessness, law enforcement, and public safety, and our economy, of course. And so there's a lot of room in the middle to work on those things, and I'm excited to get to work with people in my party and the other party on those issues. And I just want to state that I'm the only candidate in this race that is endorsed by law enforcement, the Fraternal Order of Police, also by the Affordable Housing Council and builders and contractors, and by business and labor, like the Association of Washington Business, the NFIB, the Voice of Small Business, and also the Northwest National Construction Association, which is a conglomeration of labor unions. And I'd appreciate your support, just like I have their support. And I think with more balance in Olympia, we can listen to each other and be not in our silos on Zoom again, that we can be in front of each other and hear the public testimony in Olympia. I think good things will happen this coming session, so I have a lot of hope. Thank you.
Thank you, Travis. Matt?
It's good to be here again. I'm Matt Macklin, running for the 26th LD, House position number 2. I appreciate your support this voting season. I provide a solution to what really made me run. Is I'm tired of hearing about all of the problems and all of the reasons why something can't be done. I like solutions to problems. I can provide actual solutions to our problems, and even where there is disagreement, the negotiator in me can provide a starting point to move the needle for these problems. We need more than just a vote in our legislature. We need an advocate for our community that brings something home, kill it and bring it home. Whatever it is, something, please. I'm the guy to do it. My family and I decided to raise my wife and I decided to raise our family here. I'm not from here, but I was familiar before I moved here. We chose to be here when we can be anywhere else in the country. I love this community, I love the people. I'm the only candidate in this race that's endorsed by the trades, the only one that lives in Kitsap County. I've worked in Bremerton, I know this area. I am excited to represent this area and bring home the solutions problems that are facing our community, whether it be housing, whether it be crime, whether it be the healthcare crisis we see and read about daily at this point. I am the healthcare expert in this race, and I have the solution that's going to be able to provide the results and the outcomes we need today.
Thank you, Matt. Michelle?
Well, I am so grateful to hear that my opponent wants an advocate for the community, because you have one with me. And even though I have served as a minority member this entire time, I have brought a lot of wins to the community. We have a record number of capital budget projects to the community, as well as transportation projects. In addition, I am responsible, I am the one that helped negotiate an end to the eviction moratorium, a compassionate end to the eviction moratorium, increased funding for our homeless, and also have heavily fought not only our CHI Franciscan, as well as pharmaceutical industry, and making sure that we can bring down pricing for the people, and also making sure our insurance costs are as low as possible. I serve as ranking on healthcare. I was a dentist. I have spent my entire career in healthcare. So I am actually a healthcare advocate for people. And I will continue to fight and serve our community. I have had a great track record of listening to everyone, regardless of where they stand on the political spectrum. I believe it's my job to listen to people and make sure that I'm voting in accordance to how the public would like for me to vote. And also have support of law enforcement. I actually do have the support of many trades, construction industry, as well as the building industry, and law enforcement, and many other supporters for my campaign, and I'm hopeful that I can continue to have your support as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Paige?
I just want to say thank you for having me here. We have some great representation at this table, and we have legislators that have done some really great things. And I feel like what's missing in Olympia is representation for the average citizen in Kitsap County. I'm a small business owner, and I'm a grandparent. I'm very active in the schools. And there's a large section of us that are not represented, that don't feel our voices are heard. I think it's time to bring new faces, new voices, and new ideas to the table, and have true bipartisanship. When you have one party, the majority party, that's been in charge of the legislation for over a decade, you're not really getting the full picture. Not every voice is actually heard, mostly the special interests. And I think that that's what I bring to this race and to our community as a whole. So I also think that, if you're aware, Malcolm Gladwell talks about a tipping point. And in a tipping point, that's a threshold or a critical mass that a community reaches where just small things can create big change. And we are definitely in need of big change here in Kitsap County. And I want to be that tipping point for our community, for all of the small business owners, for all of the parents, and for everybody that lives here. When you get your ballot in November, I hope that I've earned your respect and that you'll check that box next to my name. I'm Paige Jarquin, and thank you for coming today.
Thank you, Paige. Drew?
Thank you to the Chamber, the Cloverleaf, my colleagues here, and most importantly, all of you. Again, it's great to see everyone in person, and this is what democracy looks like. So thank you for coming and submitting great questions. We've had a great discussion this morning. I talked in the opening about kind of what I have done around getting new engineering and cybersecurity degrees here, making college apprenticeships more affordable. Let me talk about what I want to do, if you all are kind enough to send me back to Olympia. We're going to start with Western Washington University. They have a tiny little presence on the peninsulas right now. They got 16,000 students in Bellingham, and they want to grow. So one of the things we want to look at is what degrees do we put in place here that are going to work with the jobs that we have here. That's going to be more engineering. It's going to be more social work and counseling, because we need a lot more mental health professionals. It's probably going to be something in healthcare. And then, what do we do to make sure that people all around the Kitsap and Olympic Peninsulas know about these opportunities? I mentioned at the beginning about a bill of mine that puts a surcharge on the earnings of lawyers, software engineers, accountants, uses the money to give college and apprenticeship scholarships to families at or below the state's median income. It's a great bill. Nobody knows about it. And because nobody knows about it, people don't take advantage of it, right? What are we going to do to make sure that young people in high school right now and their parents know about the scholarship help that is available right this second, both state and federally, to go to college? But again, finally and last, it is not just about college. I plan to continue to work to expand awareness of how much money you can make in the trades without a college degree. So whether you're good with learning and reading and writing traditional school, good with your hands and fixing stuff, good with kids, good with anything, there's a path for you to a good job right here in Kitsap County. You do not have to take a ferry or drive around to get it. You can stay here, get a good job, support your family here. That's what I've always worked on. That's what I care about. I'd love to do more of it. Thanks.
Thank you, Drew. Thank you to all of our candidates today. And now is the appropriate time to show support for all of our candidates.